They tell you freedom came with signatures, speeches, and amendments. Lies. The truest kind of freedom in this land did not arrive with quills and parchment, but with blood spilled across a white linen table. Louisiana, 1829. A night carved into silence, then sealed away. Imagine this. Silver goblets gleaming beneath candlelight, the soft murmur of a feast in progress, the cruel master raising his glass, only for his throat to open under the hand of a girl no older than 21. A blade, quick, precise, and final. His blood ran into the stew bowls. His body convulsed across the feast he had demanded, and the house froze. And then, chaos. Chains unshackled, doors broken open, shadows rushing into the night. An entire plantation vanished, swallowed by the swamp. The girl's name was Eliza. But Eliza's story is not just rebellion, not survival. It is darker, older, something Louisiana soil itself seemed to birth. The land remembers. The reeds whisper. Those who still wander the bayou at night claim to hear faint humming, an old song in no known language, sung by a woman who should be long dead. She had no grave. She left no bones. The Bogard family erased her name from ledgers, burned papers that bore her handwriting, denied she ever existed. But legends are stronger than fire. The bloodline of masters ended that night. The curse of Eliza began. Understand this. Bellamar Plantation was not merely a house of cotton and cruelty. It was a theater of hidden rituals. Overseers reported gatherings in the cane fields at dusk, where Silas Bogard, lord of the estate, forced his captives to participate in rites they did not understand. Offerings buried in jars, blood mixed with rum, whispered French prayers that belonged less to God than to something older, hungrier. Even the other planters kept their distance, speaking of Silas only in mutters. They feared him. But Eliza, she was too. His shadow inside his house. She watched, she listened, and when the time came, she struck. And here's the truth they don't want you to know. Eliza's rebellion was not an act of rage, but of ceremony. Her blade was not just a knife, it was a key. When she slit her master's throat, she wasn't only ending a life. She was unlocking something chained for generations, something waiting beneath the soil of Louisiana itself. Before Bellamar collapsed into vines and whispers, it stood as a monument to terror, an empire of cotton, indigo, and silence. The man at its center, Silas Bogard, was not merely a planter. He was a predator cloaked in lace cuffs and French manners, but his cruelty dripped like venom into every acre. Slaves spoke of his punishments as though recounting plagues, bodies chained in smokehouses until lungs collapsed, mothers stripped of their children in exchange for debts, whippings that echoed into the swamps like the cries of dying animals. Yet there was another layer, darker still, that few dared speak aloud. Visitors who entered Bellamar often left unsettled. One preacher from Opelousas refused to finish his Sunday service, abandoning his Bible mid-verse when he claimed the house itself was breathing. A visiting planter muttered of strange diagrams carved into the wood beneath dining chairs, symbols like eyes staring upward during meals. Even Silas's own overseers whispered of his nocturnal wanderings into the cane fields, carrying lanterns and muttering in tongues not spoken by his kin. Those who followed never returned. And then came Eliza. She was not born on Bogard's soil. She arrived like a storm smuggled in the night. Barely 12 years old, delivered with 6 others, 2 of whom were sold within days. Eliza did not cry. She did not plead. She only stared. The others whispered that she prayed in a tongue older than the ships that carried them, older than the empire that enslaved them. She sat for hours in silence, lips moving as though reciting scripture, but not the scripture of Christ. Something else, something raw. The mistress of the house, fragile and sickly, once looked upon Eliza during a fever spell and whispered, "You have the eyes." Later, she denied ever saying it, but the phrase stuck. The eyes of Eliza unsettled all who crossed her. Children ran. Dogs whimpered. And Silas, so quick to break others, never raised his whip against her. Not once. Perhaps he feared her. Perhaps he knew something that the others did not. The years that followed carved Eliza into a presence more than a servant. She discovered the forbidden books locked away in cabinets, volumes in Latin, French, and fragments of something far older. She devoured them by candlelight, lips whispering prayers that made overseers tremble. One vanished soon after confronting her. His horse was found at the edge of the swamp. His body was never recovered. The legend of Bellemare tells us this. By the time Eliza reached womanhood, she was no longer a servant. She was an omen walking. The plantation was hers in spirit long before the blade ever touched her master's throat. By 1838, Bellemare had begun to rot from within. The crops still grew, the overseers still cracked their whips, but beneath the surface, the house itself seemed sick. Servants whispered of rooms that stank of sulfur, no matter how often they were scrubbed, of mirrors that clouded at Eliza's passing, of a sound like humming carried through the halls when no one was singing. Eliza moved like a shadow, silent, ever watchful, and yet somehow in command. The others avoided her gaze, but in secret they began to follow her. For in the darkest nights, when the moon sank low and the cane fields hissed like serpents in the wind, Eliza gathered the enslaved in hidden corners of the estate. She spoke then, not in English, not even in French, but in a guttural cadence, a language remembered from ancestors who had been dragged across oceans. Some said it was ritual, some said it was curse, but all agreed. When Eliza spoke, the air thickened, as though time itself paused to listen. Whispers spread that she could see deaths before they happened. A child she warned would not see another dawn was found lifeless in his sleep. A field hand she touched gently on the shoulder was killed by a snake the very next day. And yet, no one shunned her. No one rebelled against her. They knew. She was not the danger. They were. Because with every passing season, Eliza grew into something larger than flesh, larger than fear. Even Silas Bogard felt it. Records show his punishments increased, lashings carried out without reason, chains tightened around families who had done nothing to displease him. He grew erratic, wild-eyed, muttering about shadows in his own home. He stopped sleeping in his bed, choosing instead the great hall, as though afraid of something unseen in his chambers. But not once did he touch Eliza. Not once did he even raise his voice to her. He would pass her in the corridor and avert, his gaze muttering under his breath as if warding off a curse. The overseers whispered that Silas was haunted, but they were wrong. He was not haunted. He was hunted. And his hunter was already inside his walls, dressed in linen, carrying trays, polishing silver, biding her time. And when the hour came, she would not come alone. For Eliza had bound her people not only with whispers of freedom, but with something more primal, belief. Belief that she could split the chains not only of iron, but of fate itself. September 1839. The swamp air grew heavier, choked with the scent of iron and rot, as though the land itself anticipated blood. The Bogard estate prepared for a feast. Neighbors were summoned, planters fat with greed, drunk on their own power, eager to toast the legacy of Silas Bogard. They did not know they were walking into a tomb. Eliza oversaw the preparations. No one questioned it. She arranged the silver, placed the goblets, ensured the linens gleamed white as burial shrouds. Yet every gesture was a ritual, each fork aligned like a blade, each goblet positioned as if awaiting libation not of wine, but of blood. She moved with precision, silent authority, and those who served alongside her felt their throats tighten as though she were conducting not a supper, but a ceremony. The night descended. Carriages rolled up the drive, black silhouettes against the bayou mist. The guests entered, fanning themselves against the heat, never suspecting the fever that pulsed in the walls. They sat, they drank, they laughed. Silas Bogard raised his glass, lace cuffs trembling with age and madness. He declared it a celebration of legacy, though no one knew why. His voice cracked. His eyes darted to Eliza more than once. Perhaps, even then, he felt her shadow coiling around him. The enslaved served in silence, but silence is not absence. Beneath their breath, they mouthed words Eliza had taught them, syllables older than Louisiana, older than the empire, older even than chains. Their lips barely moved, yet the air quivered. The candles flickered. A draft moved through the hall, though no window was open. And then came the moment. Eliza stepped forward to refill her master's cup. In her hand was not merely a carafe of wine, but the knife she had polished hours earlier until its surface gleamed like a mirror. One breath, one heartbeat, one cut. His throat opened like paper torn. The wineglass tumbling, crimson spilling across the white cloth. For an instant, no one moved. The guests stared, mouths open, forks frozen in mid-air. And then the screaming began. But Eliza did not scream. She did not tremble. She only stood there, eyes unblinking, as her master's body collapsed into his feast. Blood pooled around the silver, staining lace and meat alike, and in that silence before chaos, she whispered something, too soft to be heard by the guests, but loud enough for her people. A single word, a command. And the chains began to break. The dining hall became a theater of screams. The guests lurched from their chairs, silver clattering against the floor, lace sleeves dragging through blood as they stumbled for the doors. But the doors would not open. The heavy oak, bolted by unseen hands, refused to yield. One planter pounded until his fists broke skin, yet the wood did not splinter. The windows, tall and arched, showed only blackness outside, though the moon had risen. They were trapped, and Eliza's gaze held them there like insects pinned to a board. The enslaved who stood along the walls did not panic. They moved in unison, like actors long rehearsed. Chains dropped from their wrists. Shackles cracked and fell to the floor without keys. Some say it was steel corroded by swamp air. Others whisper the iron dissolved at the sound of Eliza's voice. Whatever the cause, the enslaved stepped forward free, no longer servants, but witnesses to their mistress of vengeance. Silas Bogard writhed in a pool of his own blood, choking, clutching his neck as if to hold in his life. But no prayer would save him. The man who once commanded hundreds was reduced to a gurgling carcass upon his own feast. His guests screamed his name, pleaded for salvation, but found only Eliza's silence. And then the humming began. Low, guttural, rising from the throats of the freed. A chant older than Christ, a rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Eliza raised her hand, and they followed, their voices swelling, echoing against the rafters until the house itself seemed to tremble. The chandeliers swayed though no wind blew. Wax dripped like tears onto the table. Shadows along the walls stretched long, twisted, forming shapes not their own. What truly happened in those final moments has never been written in full. Some say Eliza slit every throat at the table, the blade flashing like a serpent's fang. Others say she never touched the guests at all, that something else entered the room when the chanting reached its peak, a darkness, faceless and vast, that devoured screams until silence returned. When the doors finally opened, there was nothing, no bodies, no feast, no fire, only overturned chairs, broken goblets, and the faint scorch of salt etched into the floorboards. Bellamar did not burn nor collapse. It simply emptied, as though swallowed whole. And from that night, Eliza was no longer merely a woman. She was legend. The morning after the feast, Bellamar stood in eerie stillness. Carriages that had brought guests remained lined along the drive, their horses restless, stamping, foam at their mouths. But the house was silent. Neighbors who dared approach swore they heard faint echoes, a fork striking a plate, the clink of glass, laughter without bodies. Yet when they entered, the dining hall was bare. No corpses, no Eliza, no master, only stains across the floorboards that looked too dark to be wine. The official record tells nothing. Shipments ceased. Ledgers went blank. The name Bellamar was struck from correspondence, as though silence itself might erase the wound. Yet silence cannot bury truth. The enslaved vanished overnight, every soul unaccounted for. Some claim they fled into the swamps, guided by Eliza through hidden paths where Spanish moss hung like curtains of another world. Others whisper they never left the house at all, but became part of it. Voices in the wood, eyes in the mirrors, shadows waiting for anyone who dares linger too long. Stories spread quickly through St. Landry Parish. Farmers spoke of a woman in white drifting along the bayou banks, her dress drenched red, her hands folded as if in prayer. Hunters claimed to hear chains dragging through the reeds at dusk, though no prisoner walked there. And children were warned, if you hear humming at night, do not answer, for it is Eliza calling, seeking to finish what was left undone. But listen closely. This is where history bends. Because Eliza was not seen again as a mortal woman. No grave was dug. No record of her death exists. The Bogard family Bible lists September 23, 1839, with a single word beside it. Judged. Not dead, not killed, but judged. What tribunal could render such a verdict? What power could mark a date without a cause? Some believe Eliza entered the swamp and never returned. Others believe she became the swamp, her spirit diffused into the humid breath of Louisiana, a guardian and a curse. The bayou itself seemed to change after that night, storms rising without warning, crops failing, families abandoning fertile land. And here is where I ask you, listener, to mark your allegiance. If you have followed this descent, type in the comments, Eliza walks, Eliza walks. Twice, so that the name binds itself to you. For names carry power, and in speaking hers, you join the chain of those who remember. Time moved on. The plantations of Louisiana fell, the Civil War tore the South apart, and yet Bellamar remained absent, as if the land itself had swallowed it whole. No maps marked it. No deeds exchanged hands. The name vanished from speech, replaced by nervous gestures toward the swamp, toward the mist where no man lingered after dusk. But Eliza was not forgotten. She was carried in whispers, in lullabies, in the trembling warnings of grandmothers rocking children to sleep. She walks when the reeds hiss. Do not answer the humming, or you will follow her into the dark. Her blade still shines beneath the water. Families who tried to settle on the old Bogard land spoke of misfortunes that struck too precise to be chance. Barns collapsing without storm, livestock found drained of blood, infants waking in the night, crying at shadows no one else could see. Some settlers fled within weeks, abandoning fertile soil as though chased by unseen hands. A few stayed, and they did not live long. Their names faded as quickly as Bellamar's. And always, Eliza. A woman glimpsed at the water's edge, candlelight flickering in her hands, a voice humming through the mist, eyes, black and endless, appearing in mirrors. She was not a ghost to frighten children. She was a presence, a reminder, a warning carved into the marrow of Louisiana itself. What makes her story different from other slave rebellions is this: freedom was not the end. It was the beginning. For most who broke chains, the story closes with escape, survival, silence. But Eliza's story opens into something else, something that refuses to end. She did not simply liberate bodies. She liberated something older, something buried in the soil, waiting for a hand brave, or cursed, enough to draw it out. Those who have tried to tell her story in full rarely finish. A folklorist in the 1890s vanished while researching Bellamar. His notes ended mid-sentence. She is not. A priest sent to cleanse the land was found wandering barefoot, eyes rolled white, muttering, "Eliza walks," until his throat bled. Even now, Researchers who dig too deeply report the same dream. A dining hall, silver set upon white linen, and a woman standing at the head of the table, waiting for them to sit. This is the curse of Eliza. To remember her is to invite her. To speak her is to risk seeing her. To seek her is to never return whole. You have walked through the ruins of Bellamar now, through the feast of blood, the vanishing of chains, the silence that followed, and yet the story of Eliza is not bound to the past. It breathes, it waits, it moves through generations like smoke through old wood. Do you not feel it? The pull at the edges of your thoughts, the name whispering against the back of your skull. Eliza. History will never tell her truth. Records end where her blade began. No court declared her guilty. No plaque preserves her name. But the land keeps memory better than any ledger. The swamps of Louisiana are graveyards that do not close, and the reeds hum with songs that no tongue living remembers. Those who step too deep into that mist hear footsteps beside their own. And sometimes, if they are very unlucky, they see a figure moving through the cypress, white dress, hands red, eyes that do not blink. Ask yourself, was Eliza a woman who broke her chains? Or was she chosen by something older, something that used her blade as the opening to seep back into this world? Did she free her people? Or did she bind them to a fate even darker than slavery? Perhaps both are true. Perhaps freedom and curse are twins, born from the same cut of the knife. I tell you this because once you know her name, you cannot unknow it. You carry her now, as those enslaved at Bellamar carried her. You are bound to her story. You are marked. And if you doubt me, go stand at the edge of a swamp at midnight, when the fog curls low and the insects still. Listen. If you hear humming, do not follow. If you see a light, do not approach. And if you hear your own name whispered from the reeds, it will not be your name at all. Because Eliza walks, and she will keep walking, long after houses rot, long after names are forgotten, long after you and I are dust. The blade is still in her hand, the feast is still set, and one day, perhaps soon, she will call again. Now you know, and knowing is enough to change you, forever.